review the proud United States Marine Corps. Since 1775, these brave young men and women have been fighting these nations' battles on air, land, and sea, from the shores of Tripoli to the halls of Moctezuma. These young men and women comprise what is perhaps the most disciplined, loyal, well-trained, lethal fighting force the world has ever seen. But let's be honest, their enlisted rank structure is just freaking stupid. Today we're going to cover the United States Marine Corps ranks, going from private all the way to Sergeant Major of the United States Marine Corps. And clearly we have a lot of work to do because these are freaking stupid. Let us start with the first four, going from private to corporal. Now, if there's two things the military does extremely well, is give away medals and assign ranks. And if you notice here on the first one, despite this young man or woman having volunteered to serve their country in a very hazardous, very difficult line of duty, we have decided that they are not entitled at least some kind of recognition upon their sleeve. Now, since private, and we like the term private, we're fine with private, it's time-honored military tradition, this private has absolutely nothing to show for his commitment and his willingness to volunteer to fight for his country. So since he's halfway through being a private, we're just going to go ahead and take half a private stripe and give it to him so he has something to wear on his sleeve. Now, moving on to private first class. The term first class denotes a certain level of elegance, comfort, sophistication that is not generally associated with the life of a private in any branch of the military. So we're going to rename him. We're going to get rid of the term first class because it's misleading, and instead, since he does have it substantially better than the private, we're just going to call him a better private. So you have private and better private. Now, moving on to the corporals. If you notice, first you become a lance corporal, then you become just a corporal. Now, if I introduce myself as a corporal and my buddy introduces himself as a lance corporal, you would think that he was higher ranked than me. So, we like the term corporal, we're going to keep it, but we're going to switch the two ranks. So first you become a corporal and then you become a lance corporal. Now, if you notice, on the insignia itself, it doesn't have a lance, it has cross rifles. The reason for this is that a lance hasn't been used in combat since, let's say the Middle Ages. So why are we calling this guy a lance corporal when he's never going to use a lance? He's probably never even seen a lance. And on the insignia itself is rifles. So we're going to call him Corporal Rifles. So we're going to have private, better private, corporal, and corporal rifles. Moving on to the sergeants. Now, the term sergeant, once again, is a time-honored military term, so we're fine with sergeant. We're going to keep sergeant. Sergeant's good. Now, once you get promoted above the rank of sergeant, you become a staff sergeant. I don't have a problem with this because usually at this point you have a staff of junior enlisted working under you, so you do have a staff. It's a true and accurate term. Now, once you get promoted, you become a gunnery sergeant, which makes no sense. In the Marine Corps, you have many different career fields. You have plumbers, mechanics, avionics, cooks, even plumbers. So to call a plumber a gunnery, meaning as in using a gun sergeant, just makes absolutely no sense. So we have to rename gunnery sergeant. Now, this guy's a little higher on the food chain than the staff sergeant, so chances are he's going to have a bigger staff. So we're going to call him bigger staff sergeant because he has a bigger staff working underneath him. That just makes sense. Moving on to master sergeant. In today's politically correct, sensitive environment should be reflected within the military. The term master carries a negative connotation that cannot be denied. So clearly, obviously, we need to change the term master sergeant. And it's not just enough to get rid of the term master, we also need to relay onto the recruits, the junior enlisted, that this is a fair and equitable force. So we're going to change the name master sergeant and we're going to call him equal opportunity sergeant. Moving on to the last four. First, we start with first sergeant. we have a huge problem with the term first sergeant, because if you notice, there are 4 sergeants in front of him. He cannot be the first sergeant when he's the 5th in line. So we're going to change the name from first sergeant to 5th sergeant, so that everybody knows there have been 4 sergeants that came before he achieved that rank. Moving on to Master Gunnery Sergeant. I have no idea what this means. He has the same rank as the other 4 guys. It doesn't even make sense, so we're just going to get rid of Master Gunnery Sergeant. That's just ridiculous. We don't need that rank. Moving on to Sergeant Major. This also makes no sense, because the term major is usually associated with the officer ranks. Now, the guy underneath him, he's not a sergeant captain. The guy above him is not a lieutenant colonel sergeant, so there's absolutely no need to have a sergeant major in the middle. So we need to change that name completely, and we're gonna call him, because let's be honest, at this time he has more stripes than a zebra. We're gonna call him the Big Chingon. So he's gonna be called the Big Chingon Sergeant. Now moving on to the last guy, and there's only one of these guys in the entire Marine Corps, and this guy is the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. Once again, there should be no major there, and if he's the top guy, then it would have to be Sergeant General, but that doesn't sound right either, because these generals associated with the officer ranks. So taking a cue from the Big Chingon Sergeant, we're gonna call this guy the Big Chingon Sergeant of the Marine Corps Rifles.